how long have you been working in cinematography as a cinematographer?
Yeah, so as a director of photography, I've been working close to about 18 years, I guess. I mean, I started off in the camera department as a video split operator and worked my way up through from loading to focus pulling, and yeah, eventually a bit of camera operating and eventually becoming a DP. It's been about 18 years for me now, and I did start quite young.
And what inspired you, or what got you interested in cinematography and photography?
Well, I had always been a film lover as a kid, and I just thought that filmmaking was just it for me. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I went to a art school with the goal of being a director, but while I was there, I just found myself more and more focusing on camera and the techniques and lighting, and just that became my focus, and I just fell in love with it. And I found most of the other students end up wanting me to shoot their productions, so I was able to get a really great show reel just from shooting back-to-back short films and experimental films with students. And then it was coming out of that, cinematography was my passion.
And that's always when people are asking you to shoot their stuff, then that's always a good thing. So
yeah.
All right. So can you briefly share some of your experience with drones and using drone footage in films?
Yeah, so I've been lucky to work with drones quite a bit from early on when they first started to become a thing that could be considered to be used with cinema. One of my first experiences was I was the second unit director DP on a children's movie, it was a family movie called Paper Planes, which was shot in Australia. And being a story of paper planes, we needed to, and flight in general, we obviously needed the camera to travel quite a bit. So I was tasked with just finding different ways to shoot the POV of paper planes, to shoot the plates, VFX plates they could drop the planes into, as well as we had birds and various other things. We just wanted to have a real sense of flight throughout the whole movie. And so that was a really great intro to working with drones. And I'd worked with a few smaller ones. I've done a few shoots before, but the quality of the cameras weren't really up to the specs for a cinema release. And they wanted to do a 3D version of this film too, so they wanted to have at least a 2K camera on there. And so this was about 9 years ago. So we ended up finding a team that could build one for us. This is before DJI had their own ones you could order online. So they had to hand build one that could lift we had a Blackmagic 2K cinema camera, which we found was the best and lightest camera, and went through all the tests of just test by filling a water bottle and attaching that to the drone and seeing how much weight we could carry, how far we could take it, and how long before we knew that we had a safe drone. And then once we worked out all the parameters, we were able to do some really great shots. And this was also, and I'm really glad that the Civil Aviation Authority has sort of stepped in and put some guidelines, because in the early days it was a bit Wild West. Like there was not really, you'd only just like, how close can we get this to an actor before they feel unsafe, rather than now there's quite strict guidelines. But yeah, following that, I've just incorporated them in a bunch of different films and television projects that I've shot, and always just when we really felt we needed a sense for the camera to take flight, or to elevate within a scene, or to be able to see the geography of a scene, or to do a shot that is an establisher for the landscape and where the film is about to go. And I've just found them so useful as a tool for filmmaking.
And that's interesting. A lot of, I guess, I don't know if it's really known, but from just talking to people and just talking to drone operators and stuff, a lot of kind of experimental cinematic drones were created in Australia. A lot of companies I talked to, a lot of drone pilots and stuff, were testing stuff in Australia to see how much weight can we carry, and how much, how big of a camera can we carry, and let's try to, how much, what lens can we put on this. And I was hearing a lot of Australian companies that were doing that. So, but yeah, you're right. It was very, very Wild Westish at the onset, and so it's good that there are some safeguards. But then at the same token, there are some, got to work around different restrictions and stuff. But I guess it's good.
Yeah.
So you talk about paper planes. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. That trying to give that perspective with drones. But some of the stuff that I saw on your reel, you know, with like Ophelia and Luminaries and stuff, especially that you're using now, especially now as technology has advanced with DJI and more of the heavy lift drones that are out there that can carry the red cameras and the Alexas and stuff. What you know, what do you feel the drone footage can add to film, especially like the ones that you've shot?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Ophelia, and that was one in particular where the director really wanted to have an opening sequence which had some fluidity and really took the audience into the world and set the tone, set the pace. And we started the film with a shot which was on a techno crane, very graceful move over the water surface, and we see the actress Daisy Ridley in the water, and we're recreating a painting that was from well, that is of Ophelia. But we then wanted the camera to continue fluidly, and after we do the shot where it comes up over her and she sinks, the titles come up, and then we wanted to do a smooth transition into here we are now in the world of Ophelia, and wanted to have something with a lot of scope and cinematic, you know, quality to it. And I mean, the only way to do that was with a drone, and we were shooting that in the Czech Republic, and we spent a lot of time doing pre-visualization of that scene. In fact, we actually employed a drone to do some previs for our crane shot as well, because we had her out over the water, and we knew that we had a 50-foot techno, and we knew how far I was going to be able to reach, but we just needed to work out the parameters and just do a preview of the shot, look at the different lenses. And the only way to do that over water, you can't just pop up a ladder and have a lens in position. We used a Mavic Pro to do our previs of the crane shot, which we learned a lot from doing that. It was the perfect way to do it. And then we use that same Mavic Pro to previs a shot which comes off the water, and we're in between some mountains, and we just wanted to see how high we needed to go, or, you know, find a good position. We wanted the visual effects to be able to do some previs with that footage too, you know, comp in roughly what we're going to be seeing in the final version, and just work out timing and have a whole lot of conversations. So it's really good to use a smaller drone for previs. And then we went back out on a weekend just with a small crew, and had a Alexa Mini with a Hawk anamorphic lens on it, and which are the same lenses we were shooting the rest of the production on, and just created a shot which we couldn't do any other way. You mentioned the Luminaries, so that's a TV series which we shot in New Zealand, and it's all set in the 1860s in the South Island of New Zealand, which is very big, rugged landscape, and a lot of it's set on the coast. A lot of the story is ships out on the ocean, and there's only a few ways you can really do that. And the best way that we found was to travel around, myself and a drone pilot. We had about 5 days where we just skipped around, whether we were on it, flew to different locations, or we'd drive across the land. We'd just pop the drone up and get a few great landscape shots for the whole series during that period. But we also did a lot of plates where we needed to put in shipwrecks and our ships traveling, where we were often using a boat for a platform to take off from, and then we'd use the boat that we're flying from as a tracking boat to then visual effects a big sailing boat onto that. And we were able to get some really great shots from the water, which really, to have done it any other way, would have been very expensive and near impossible for what we end up being able to do.
Yeah. My nervousness gets up when you start talking about flying from boats, because it's just always one of those things where it's like you're taking off and landing from the boat. You're never sure, you know, it's always that of where's this camera going to land?
Well, exactly. Well, we had an excellent pilot, and we did have a backup drone as well. And that was the Inspire 2 that was shot on, which up until that point, I was quite dubious of using some of the smaller cameras. I was always, you know, it's got to be an Alexa or a Red. But then we did some tests with the Inspire 2, and it just looked great. We went into the colorists, into their suite, and we had a look at compared the images, looked at how they graded, and it was great. And it cut together perfectly with the Alexa footage. So that's the perfect one. So like the pilot made some handlebars which we could catch the drone if we were in rough seas, or he just landed on one of the boats we had like a little trampoline top to it, and just landed on that, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, actually, the other thing we did with it too was just even just using the Inspire as a handheld. Because sometimes we wanted the same kind of shot, but wanted it right down near the water's surface, and particularly when you're in rough seas, we weren't really so keen to take off either. But it was great just using it as the drone in the hand and still use it the same way, but just turn the propellers off, and got some really great footage that way.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. If you use that, if you can continue the shot, or were able to continue that scene by landing the drone and then moving it into a handheld kind of, because you can do that with the
Yeah, yeah, which is great. I haven't done that myself. I've seen it done very effectively.
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, another thing you mentioned, which is great, that some people don't necessarily think about. They think about shooting with drones, and they think about, how the footage works, but the idea that the preview shots and kind of setting up, what does this scene really look like from this perspective, and using, like, again, like a Mavic, just to give you that spotter kind of a view, to be like, oh, okay, now I see how this is going to play out. I see how this is going to work. So not even really using the footage, but using it just as an extra set of eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, particularly if you're going to be spending a lot of money and hiring some expensive crane equipment, or you need to build a little set piece that's very specific compositionally within a frame. You want to be able to preview where it's all going to sit and how it's going to fit. And yeah, it's a really great tool like that.
Yeah, the producer's pretty excited about hearing that about you maximizing the time there and the expense. So
absolutely.
So all right, so as a cinematographer tasked with the look of the overall film or piece, is it easier or more difficult to visualize the drone content? And we kind of alluded to this as far as with previewing, and then is it, like, if you're at a scene, like when you were jumping around in southern New Zealand, were you able to, like, are you able to incorporate, oh, this will look good from an aerial shot easier now because you worked with drones, or is it kind of more challenging to get that perspective and visualize that?
Yeah, well, I've worked with them enough to know what, in my feelings and opinion, what works for me cinematically in terms of a move. And like for me, I like my drone moves to feel like an extension of a crane move, something graceful. You've got to have enough speed on it so it's not a really long shot on screen. So you've got to find that right duration and the right pace. But yeah, I think it just comes from experience, knowing what feels right, and also just knowing what, just lining up bits of landscape or characters and knowing what happens when you do a reveal and move around your stuff, because you can very quickly run out of ideas with the drone once it's in the air. You're like, okay, there's a few positions, but what else can we do with it? How can we think about how it's going to cut into the next scene? So you want to think about in and out points with your moves as well, which is always quite good. And editors love it if you've got something that reveals or opens the scene with the move, if it tilts up or it comes up behind a piece of landscape or a building and reveals the scene. That stuff is so valuable in an edit. Yeah, but I think the important thing that you touch on there is just that visual continuity across the whole project. You don't ever want to have the film where you're sitting there going on this journey with the actors, and then all of a sudden the audience is pulled out of the journey because the drone shots just look like something completely different, not just technically, but just creatively as well. And that's why it's quite important to have a director of photography who oversees the visual style across the whole project, that can say, well, this is the way we've been shooting the whole film, and we need our drone shots to fit within that style. So there's a little bit of guidance that will happen there. And also that sometimes I'm often using filters as well, to whether it's to soften the look or lower contrast, and I want that same look to be on the drone shot. So being able to get a few sets of just different filters I can use there to keep that continuity as well. But yeah, it's something which it's a hard one to sometimes describe to another. If you're sending off another crew to go shoot the drone shot, it's more of an instinctual thing than giving a direction as to how things are going to fit in. But I mean, you'd use language like, we want the moves not to be too fast. We want it to be gradual. We want reveals. We don't want big camera movements. We want the camera to kind of lock on objects, and using those kind of terms, you start to develop a description of how to turn into a style that you might have been developing for the whole project.
And that also goes to working with the drone crew, so they kind of having a relationship or whatever, or an understanding, so they can help see your vision or see what you're trying to do, so that way you can use the language like that, so you can send them off and you're going to get what you want.
Yeah, well, the other thing you get is most drone crews that do it on a day-to-day, weekly basis, they have such a wealth of experience that they can then, like, I might give a bit of a brief, but then they can take that further, or they might do what I've described, but then, we tried it with a little bit of this or a little bit, tried something a little different, and then they can come up with something quite amazing too. So you never want to, completely lock them into something that, bring on their wealth of experience and knowledge.
Yeah, and they'll give you options. That's the big thing.
Exactly.
Getting options.
Yeah.
So working with drones and drone crews and stuff, do you happen to have any unique or funny stories working with drones? You talked about some of these little situations.
Well, I've seen a few drones go down. They're funny in hindsight, but not funny at the time when you see it happen. One particular one that's very memorable was actually shooting up in the top northwest of Australia, which is very remote, amazing landscape. It's all big red earth and mountains and rivers and crocodiles and all that. And we were doing a shot which we had the Alexa Mini and we had the Cook anamorphic lens, was sort of on the limits of the kind of the weight that the drone could carry, but it was just a case of the extreme temperature. Just on these things you only learn from experience and often learn when things go wrong. The extreme temperature meant that the batteries just discharged a lot more rapidly than any of us expected. And it was a case of the director looking at the monitor and not even knowing how far away the drone was and just saying to the pilot, just like, oh, this is looking great. What's it like over the next ridge? And can we just get a little bit higher? I mean, what's it like over the ridge after that? Can you go over there? And we just kept pushing it. And the drone pilot's like, I'm sorry, guys, we're going to have to bring it in now. You can just see the bolts dropping very rapidly and just racing in. And we all just take a step back and let the pilot take control. They're the expert and we don't want to get involved. But it just before it got to us, it just died and fell through trees and bounced off trees and landed right in the crocodile infested river, which we were told to stay away from. And the production had hired a guy with a shotgun to defend us if any crocs came out. So then it turned into a whole exercise of making sure there were no crocs there, sending one guy in to bring it out. And when we salvaged it sunk, and you could smell the batteries, just the acid come out of the batteries into this water. But the footage was saved thanks to the quick thinking of turning off the recording. If it had continued recording, I mean, I don't know if you know that, but with the cameras recording to a card, if it's still recording, when it shorts out, it can just corrupt the whole file. But if you cut recording, it closes off the clip, and we were still able to use the footage, thankfully. And we took a spare drone and spare camera with us so we could keep shooting as well, which is very important.
It's always good to have a backup.
Definitely.
But you describing that, I just had that vision of especially seeing it come back and just knowing, and then it's everything just in slow motion and you're just watching it drop and oh.
Yeah.
Oh man. So kind of the last thing, forward thinking, how do you think drones benefit storytelling? And what do you think the future is for drones as a cinematic tool, as you've seen kind of grow over the years? Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, well, for me, drones, and as a filmmaker, like a narrative filmmaker, it's really got to be about the storytelling and the world building. And what the drone can do beautifully is it can just really expand the world to be able to give you some perspective that just opens up. I mean, that's also a thing emotionally as well. Like, the traditional Hollywood ending of the film is often a nice big crane shot back, but now you can just take that so much further, or just the opening shot is a big reveal of the world and take you into it, and that has an emotional impact for the audience as well, being able to do that. But also a big thing that I always like to look at with storytelling is just the audience getting a sense of the geography that the character is within. Just I feel like you engage more with the character if you know what the surrounds are, whether it's like just within a interior environment, or whether it's how big the landscape around them is, or how big the journey is to the castle, or how far away is the destination, the other character they're trying to get to. And a drone can really give you the ability to really expand that world that the audiences that the characters are inhabiting. Or the other thing is just to be able to travel with a character who's racing along on a horse or in a car, and just like there's many ways of doing it, but to be able to lock onto that character and travel with them, it just allows the audience to feel like they're traveling with too, in a way that there's only certain ways you can actually do that, but a drone can really open up that scope. But I think like the future of where drones can go, I think the pun intended, the sky is the limit. I mean, you can really, it really is limited to how far the drones can go, the battery life, the power they have. I mean, they're able to get smaller now, but just to have control and speed and keep it up in the air for longer is great. But then also safety is a big thing too. Just it's always been how close can you get it to people or to crowds, and I think that some of those safety concerns are all being looked at now, and being able to make them much safer to fly closer. So I think it's I think as just as more what I find is that every time I'm on a project, someone, whether it's the director or someone in the team, says, well, what if we did it like this, or could the camera get closer or further or bigger or move like that, or we want it to be really fast. And it's just as ideas for a story evolve or push things more to the limit, I think then we start to push the technology. And I mean, I think that's what's been happening with drones too. It's like, can we put a Alexa 65 on a drone because we want to do it for IMAX? And so then the drones get bigger, and then they can do some of those things like in Mulan, that where they've got large format cameras flying over massive battles. To can we get the drone to land and go into the room and follow the characters down there? And that just sort of starts to evolve the technology as the ideas lead them, I guess.
Yeah, it's the demand out of the creativity of directors and cinematographers and stuff to then say, hey, let's try this. And then the fact that the drone manufacturers and people just making drones are saying, yeah, let's see if we can do this. So yeah, no, I think I like I said, I think it's just gonna open up the idea. A lot of people think of the opening scenes and the ending scenes, like you talked about, the big Hollywood reveals and stuff like that. But the following aspect, I think, gives that, puts the audience in that perspective that that they don't get to see normally, or it helps them get with a character. It helps them really immerse themselves in that storytelling. So, and I think that's something that drones can do too. So I agree 100% with you. Well, great. Yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have.
Right.
I appreciate, you, I was going to say, I appreciate you getting up so early, but it's me that got up so early. But no, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And, the information you provided is great. And I think it'll inspire others and help others.
Oh, I hope so. Oh, fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Jay.
All right, man. Take care.